himself to the attention of his fellows assembled in public meeting. The occasion was trivial, and it is only for this reason that I mention it. His personality at once became known and remembered, and I recollect that many total strangers spoke to him that evening. By next morning the transportation officials had worked it out. We could not all get into the office, so the drawing took place on the plaza outside. As each man's name was called, he stepped forward, showed his ticket, and was allowed to draw a slip from the box. If it proved to be a blank, he went away. If he was lucky, he had his ticket viced on the spot. Such a proceeding took the greater part of the day, but the excitement remained intense. No one thought of leaving even for the noon meal. Yank drew passage on the first steamer. Talbot, Johnny, and I drew blanks. We walked down to the shore to talk over the situation. "We ought to have bought tickets good on this particular ship, not merely good on this line," said Johnny. "Doesn't matter what we ought to have done," rejoined Talbot a little impatiently. "What are we going to do? Are we going to wait here until the next steamer comes along?" "That's likely to be 2 or 3 months. Nobody knows," said Johnny. "No, it's in 6 weeks, I believe. They tell me they've started regular trips on a new mail contract." "Well, 6 weeks. If we stay in this hole we'll all be sick, we'll be broke, and in the meantime every ounce of gold in the country will have been picked up." "What's the alternative?" I asked. "Sailing vessel," said Talbot briefly. "That's mighty uncertain," I objected. "Nobody knows when one will get in, and when it does show up, there'll be a mad scramble to get to her. There's a mob waiting to go." "Well, it's one or the other. We can't walk, and I don't see that the situation is going to be much better when the next steamer does get here. There are a couple of hundred to crowd in on her, just counting those who are here and have tickets, and then there will be a lot more." "I'm for the sailing vessel," said Johnny. "They come in every week or two now, and if we can't make the first one, we'll have a good chance at the second or the third." Talbot looked at me inquiringly. "Sounds reasonable," I admitted. "Then we've no time to lose," said Talbot decisively, and turned away toward the town. Yank, who had listened silently to our brief discussion, shifted his rifle to his shoulder and followed. Shortly he fell behind, and we lost him. We accompanied Talbot in some bewilderment, for there was no ship in sight nor in prospect, and we could not understand any reason for this haste. Talbot led the way directly to the steamship office. "I want to see Brown," he asserted, naming the chief agent for the company. The clerk hesitated. Brown was an important man, and not to be disturbed for trivial matters, but Talbot's eye could be very assured. "What is your business with Mr. Brown?" asked the clerk. "It is with Mr. Brown," said Talbot firmly, "and I may add that it is to Mr. Brown's own interest to see me. Tell him just that Mr. Talbot Ward of New York City desires an immediate interview." The clerk was gone for some moments, to the manifest annoyance of a dozen miners who wanted his attention. When he returned, he motioned us to a screened-off private office in the rear. "Mr. Brown will see you," said he. We found Brown to be a florid, solidly built man of 50, with a keen eye and a brown beard. He nodded to us briefly and looked expectant. "We 3 men," said Talbot directly, "hold 3 tickets on your line. We were not fortunate enough to get passage on the next steamer, and our business will not permit us to wait until the one after. We want our money back." Brown's face darkened. "That is a matter for my clerks, not for me," he said curtly. "I was told your business was to my advantage. I have nothing to do with tickets." "1 minute," said Talbot. "There are between 200 and 300 men in this town, each one who bought a ticket from your company in New York in the expectation, if not under the understanding, that they were to get through passage immediately." "No such thing was expected or guaranteed," interposed Brown abruptly. "Not guaranteed nor expected by you. By us, yes." "I cannot argue the matter. I have no further time for you. Good day." And Brown once more reached his hand toward his bell. "Suppose," said Talbot softly, leaning forward, I should put it into the heads of those 300 men that they ought to get their passage money back." Brown's hand stopped in midair. "They are large, violent, armed men, and they are far from pure home influences," went on Talbot mockingly. "Here's a sample of them," said he, indicating my huge frame. "And there are 1,000 or so more, not directly interested, but dying for excitement." "Are you trying to intimidate me, sir?" demanded Brown. "I'm just stating conditions." "You are threatening me." "Ah, that is different," said Talbot Ward. Brown sat lost in thought for some moments. Then he reached forward and at last struck the bell. "Let me have your tickets," he commanded us shortly. He endorsed them and handed them to the clerk, together with a written order. We sat in absolute silence for perhaps 5 minutes. Then the clerk returned with a handful of gold. This Brown counted over and shoved across to Talbot. The latter also counted it and thrust it in his pocket. "Now," said Brown, with something approaching geniality, "I am counting on your honor to say nothing of this outside. I am gambling on your evident class in life at home." "You have our promise, and it will be kept," said Talbot, rising. "But undoubtedly within 2 days you will think I'm the biggest liar unhung. There will be many more who will think of the same simple plan of getting a refund on their tickets, and who will blab it out to everyone on the street. You will do well to make your plans now as to how you intend to deal with them. But remember, I nor my friends will have had nothing to do with it." "I understand that there will be plenty making your same demand," said Brown, "but I doubt any of them will think of urging that demand." We left. As a matter of interest, Talbot's prediction was correct, as indeed Brown had immediately recognized it would be. Talbot had only the advantage of thinking a little quicker than the next man, of acting immediately, and of allowing no time for reflection to the other. The steamship office had a strenuous time. Talbot's threat had this much of real significance, that there was, lacking him, no organized demonstration. Each man went for himself and demanded his money back. In a few rare cases he got it, but was generally bluffed out or blandly referred back to the New York offices, or reasoned out. The situation came near to riot, but in some difficult manner it was tidied over. A few settled down to wait for the next steamer. The majority decided for sailing ships, and pocketed their steamer tickets in hopes of future reimbursement. One score of fanatics and ignoramuses, in dense ignorance as to the nature of the journey, actually started out to row to San Francisco in an open boat. They were never heard of again. 1 or 2 parties modified this plan by proceeding in fishing boats to the extremity of the peninsula of Lower California, and thence marched overland to San Diego. Their suffering in that arid region was great, but they managed to arrive many months later. We returned to our lodgings, congratulating Talbot on the promptitude of his action, for already we saw determined-looking men hurrying across the plaza toward the offices. At our place we found that Yank had not returned. At first we thought nothing of this, but about dusk we found that all his belongings had disappeared.